All right, welcome back. This is Conversations from the Underground, episode 6. I got Dr. B with us today, as usual, partner in crime. What's going on, man?
Oh man, chilling. How you doing?
Doing good. Decided to celebrate Thanksgiving early because I got a lot of family and friends that have other obligations, and I tend to operate very last minute. So, I didn't invite anybody and, formally and say this or say that. So I just sent everybody a text like a day before. I decided to buy a turkey, and then we just went at it, and it turned out good.
Nice. Yeah, I guess we going to my mom's house like we usually always do. Uh, but Brandy and my wife and daughter Meadow are driving to Atlanta tomorrow morning to hang out with her sister.
Ah,
Um,
cool.
and so it'll just be me and my son chilling at my mom's. You know, uh, be interesting. I have a lot of time to work this week. See how much I can get done with all this grading and all this writing I want to do. But yeah, that's it. It's celebration, huh? Celebration. That's interesting. You ever have any historical conversations during this time period at these little celebrations with your family?
Nah, like my family's not into, I guess, historical conversations during Thanksgiving.
Hmm.
Like we never talk about like the meaning of Thanksgiving. We never talk about pilgrims. We never talk about Native American culture. Even though, being Hispanic, we got some family members that for a fact are indigenous. You just look at them and you're like, whoa. Um, but nah, I think it's because of the busyness of the moment and the sporting events that usually occur. That those are the things that we tend to focus on. We never really get into any conversation like that. Everything's very
Those manufacturing consent things, huh?
I guess so. Everything's like face value,
Yeah, it's
you
interesting
know.
because stuff kind of goes together. I wonder if it would be fair to say that we're exhibiting a colonized mindset by participating in these Thanksgiving rituals without really thinking much about them. It's interesting. I mean, my family, it's just me and my parents and my wife and them. So ain't nothing different than in any other old philosophical conversation me, my pops, and my brother be getting into at any given time. You know what I mean? But it's funny how we talk about these things in class and in history, and then in life, we go through life maybe, uh, like celebrating Christmas, celebrating Thanksgiving. I'm not a Christian, but I celebrate Christmas. You know what I mean? We eat a bunch of stuff on Thanksgiving, even though we know that the holiday historically is really interesting. Um, and has a deep kind of history that maybe we're still grappling with. But we nevertheless participate in these rituals.
Right. Well, I mean, I think more often than not, considering that like this is a nation of immigrants, there will always be this tendency to to not maybe understand, but do simply to avoid critique and not condemnation, but like so you're not jeered at, so you're not made fun of. There's always that notion that, well, this is what everyone else is doing, so we want to fit in too. Let's do it as well. As especially when it comes to like kids. So what happens is with kids, they'll see their friends doing something, and immediately they'll wonder, why aren't we doing it?
Right.
Like I tell a joke in my class all the time about how I don't celebrate my birthday. I don't celebrate birthdays for my kids until my little girl came home from school and she said, "Dad, they had this thing. I don't know what it was, but this student got gifts, and she said she was born today, and I don't understand that. And everybody was singing songs to her, and I go, I don't want you hanging around with those friends. Stop all that. That's weird." And she goes, "I don't know what that was, but can we do that for me on the day that I'm born?" So I think there's a lot of societal pressure Even with the holidays, like everybody's trying to go shopping right now with this Black Friday, like early Black Friday. It's a week before Black Friday. What's Black Friday? And why is it the day after Thanksgiving? It's a lot of that stuff for sure. For me, I got a big family, so um, we can't always all get together. Like even yesterday, man, if I could have, I would have had everybody over. My joint is small, so and then I have to rack my brain about like, okay, um, who really needs to be invited because they may not have family members around. Because I tend to invite people that maybe not they don't have family to celebrate with. They just don't want to be alone. I have a high school friend of mine time was battling or struggling with homelessness, and it's just a given. We always invite him to Thanksgiving. His family lives in Arkansas, and he lives by himself in Texas. So
Yeah, that reminds me of
the holidays are just another reason to get together.
yeah, that's a good point. That reminds me of a lot of that those years that we went and did the homeless shelter feeding event and ballroom sort of thing where they came and played games often, and we played chess. We did it a few years in a row. I think prior to COVID, kind of really put a wedge in that. Even though I think we did it though maybe somewhere around there last time. But to me, it's like these kind of things show. Like we don't go and have a celebrate or have a event like that every single day. We only do it during the holiday, right? Which makes me think sort of like there's more. The meaning of a holiday is more than the history behind it.
Sure.
And that's an interesting question about how do you grapple with this as a historian who sees maybe problems in the way we remember history, but to what extent should one utilize their tools, their skills, their knowledge to shift the culture in some degree, or are you complacent for?
Yeah, in a macro sense, I could see that. In a macro sense, I could see that. Um, However, you bring something up like, as historians, how do we look at this event and try to understand it enough to where we could shift culture? Where I think I saw something in the Atlantic arguing that Thanksgiving, in its traditional sense, is kind of taking possibly no, of course it's not, but there's this potential for a friendsgiving being more um, talked about or presented, a friendsgiving, not Thanksgiving, a friendsgiving, in that you do the same stuff, but you don't do it in the traditional sense of it's got to be turkey, it's got to be ham, it's got to be this, it's got to be that. It's just a reason to get your friends together and celebrate. Now, one could make an argument, well, we do that all the time. And not for nothing, if you're Hispanic, yo, we're always finding reasons to celebrate something. It's always a reason to break open the grill. The grill's always open anyways. My friends will always ask me, hey, what'd you do for Cinco de Mayo? We did fajitas and tablitas and we had coronas. And that's just a Tuesday for me. That's a Wednesday for me. That's a Thursday. It's just something we do every day. One thing I will say, though, about this whole notion of what can we do on a macro level, at least that's the way I'm framing it at the moment, is on the micro level, the development of culture within your family. Because, of course, we can talk about American culture at large, right?
Mm-hmm.
But then we can also talk about like your family culture and how you cultivate that for your children to see or the young ones to see, because then they ultimately learn for them that this is what Thanksgiving is, or this is what Friendsgiving is. Um, in a way, these gatherings kind of teach community within our own microcultures, if you will, within your own family, that this is how we get down. This is how we host. this is how and why we invite certain people. And like I tell my kids, they'll ask, is this person coming over? And like, boy, that person's coming over, and they're probably gonna have 3 plates. And go ahead and get them all ready, And it's cool. And as a matter of fact, get them a plate to go, because you know it. Some people just don't got it like that, and the idea of giving. Not, it doesn't have to be like it's a charity thing, but it's just like, man, let's share something.
Yeah,
Let's
see,
share
that's
something.
key, because I mean it shows that holidays are more than the reason historically that we proclaim them to exist, right? Um, and it's interesting because one could have a top-down, deliberate attempt to create a holiday for a purpose, but the communal micro interactions on the family level within that structure can tweak it and change it and adapt
Yep.
it and manipulate it for their own purposes. But what's interesting is that it kind of reminds me of what you said about your daughter's birthday, though. Like, you can only manipulate it to some extent, because if you try to forget about it or pretend it doesn't exist or do something that's completely opposite, the kid realizes, right? And they're like, whoa. So it's like you sort of have to operate within this society, because there are these societal interactions that people uh, use to operate within these traditions. And then there's those micro level ones. And so how you go about getting those micro level ones are interesting. When the mood is fun, when the community is there, and you all start to recognize a particular thing, and then it becomes a habit and becomes a ritual, and it gets repeated, and it adds on to the holiday kind of tradition. So you're constantly developing and creating something new at the same time in which you're uh, celebrating something old. Which is why maybe these holidays aren't really history by themselves, right? They're also creating history and creating these moments, which is a fine kind of line, though, because reminds me of the Soviet Union creating like holiday worker holidays and things like this, like or the Catholic Church kind of like morphing some of its holidays with pagan traditions. Uh, this attempt to try to bridge people's associations with what you want to be the dominant culture, uh, so that they frame their interactions within this system that you created. And to what extent are you ever really going to be able to make any kind of change if you're operating within those systems? Is an interesting question to think about.
Well, for sure. I mean, I can't say we, but I know I've always heard, people will say, uh, Christmas has lost its meaning,
Mm.
right? Or so we have evidence of these traditional historical events changing so much so over generations that you have these older heads that would make arguments that, oh well, the holidays are not the same. They're not what they used to be about. They have changed. And in the sense, at least in America, for sure, we can argue, it's more consumerism than it is Christianity. But what we can observe is that you're right, man. It's like they can be tweaked, they can be augmented to a degree, but there has to be some element of it that remains for it to be valid or identified as such, as a birthday.
Yeah.
We still have to maintain some parts of it. And but does and if it exists if it exists merely by name though, right? We could call it that, but the operations are completely different. Is it still the same? Like, for if Christmas was only the celebration of Christ's birthday and giving thanks or whatever, is that what it's turned into? For many, it hasn't. It's completely different now. I don't think my kids don't even know who that dude is. We don't talk about it over here.
Right.
My kids are just like, hey yo, did you get me the Legos or what?
Yeah.
Um, There's no conversation. There's no uh, three wise men or 12 days of this, and there ain't none of that over here. It's just like, hey yo, your dad hustled up some funds and got you some stuff. Um, so I think we do have the capacity, and I think it shows value in certain communities to augment stories and augment history. Does it transform again that macro arc? Probably not, but does it need to? Like, does it by name, does it need to change it if we're kind of doing it in our own little subversive ways?
Right.
I don't
That's a
know.
great point.
I,
It's a
I
great
think about
point.
that with teaching. I know when I taught public high school, the we have state standards. That's mad macro, especially in the state of Texas. You got to teach this, you got to teach it like that, you got to do this. But man, once that door closes, I'm doing whatever I want to do.
Hmm.
And then I'm going to say I do this. I call it Christmas, but I'm doing the other thing. I call it following this teaks or that tax or that objective, but in reality, I'm just lecturing. I think we have in these micro communities, we have the capacity um, to augment them to be what we would like them to be.
Yeah. You know, um, this way I could add to that or sum that up is sort of that start by saying that holidays and holiday traditions are a reflection of culture.
Mm,
And culture is this very malleable, elastic, um, permeable entity that almost, for lack of better words, has a mind of its own or a being of its own, um, that we tap into and add to and pull from in our daily lives. And I studied this this kind of like way a discipline or a topic that one of my professors, Dr. Thomas Adam, kind of created, called intercultural transfer, where you kind of like you start with this understanding of culture and then you try to pick a cultural thing, and then trace its transfer from one society to another and try to like pay attention to the nuance transformations that occur as it migrates or disperses or makes its way to another area of the world, right? So something like Christmas, the
mhm,
Christmas tree
mhm,
was a German tradition. Germans brought it over here, and then U.S. Americans appropriate it and turn it into part of their national sort of entity today, or something like kindergarten that began in Germany and made its way all over the world, or hell, even just a commodity like how people in the Arab world cultivated sugar and what they did with it compared to what people in the Atlantic world did when they cultivated it and mass produced it. You know, you add all of these things up, and I think what they all kind of reflect is this sort of symbiotic relationship between who we are on this micro level and these attachments that we develop with what we call holidays, right? It's far more than uh, its stated meaning. It's far more than what it has been, a holiday, because it's also what it's becoming, right? At the same time. And so they constantly evolve. And so I would say if you're so overly critical about a holiday by saying, you know, Thanksgiving began with the genocide of Indians, we're over here celebrating it and you're all upset, you're missing the entire point of what I just described here about the malleability and evolving nature of culture and how the holiday is more than that. And you can participate in transforming it to something even more further removed from that which you are upset about when it comes to a holiday. You can do that by simply participating in it and shifting it by adding your elements and flavors, I think.
For sure. And some people, I mean, there are counter arguments, and not just holidays, but just days of remembrance in general. For example, like for some people, Veterans Day is a big day. Not only some people, but all across the nation. As hey, hey, where's my 10%? Hey, yo, where's my free meal? Hey, yo, and not that they're saying that, but there are those feelings that we need to observe and reflect upon those that served and how whatever. And then for some people, I'm like, and I'm not saying I'm some people, but maybe I am, but I don't know. But I'm just saying, some people are like, okay, and I don't, I don't. Some people might look at Veterans Day and like, I don't support any operation of a government agency who follows orders without any individual conscious uh, consideration. Because a good soldier
and it's a
follows
job,
orders.
like being paid to do that, right? And then all these other types of things that you could argue. Someone could say the same thing about
and no disrespect.
Yeah, someone could say
And I'm not.
why we have a teacher appreciation day. You're getting paid, you're doing your job. Why do we have these things? Well, maybe they're more. It's more than just the actual thing, right? It boosts self-esteem. It influences a sense of belonging, increases your productivity. All of these other things that go beyond being a simple soldier or being a simple teacher. And by doing these things, you're boosting all those other elements of the human experience around that particular entity, right?
Right, and it's definitely targeting a community that generally everybody knows, but doesn't want to do anything about. But we all know that, yeah, these people put in the work, and we really don't revere them as much as we could. And this is how you'll know. Anytime you tell anybody what you do, and they say this, "Thank you for your service."
Yeah, yeah.
Right. That means one of two things. One, we know you don't get paid. Which you should have get paid.
Yeah, you're doing more work.
I should be paying you more, but
yeah.
Instead I'm gonna give you thank you for your service.
Right.
Because as educators, we get that all the time.
Yeah.
One other thing. Go ahead.
No, go ahead. Keep on.
One other thing I was gonna bring up was like, in regards to these moments of remembrance, whether they're holidays or they're just certain days. I mean, just like for example, like Columbus Day is not a U.S. holiday. Columbus Day. It has there's a counter movement to say I'm not celebrating Columbus Day. This is Indigenous Peoples Day. The notion that Dr. King's birthday became a holiday. The very next day, I think it's the Confederate States of America holiday or something. Like the next day, something of that nature.
That's interesting.
So you have these.
Yeah, that reminds me of this nationalization of holidays and the attempt to sort of merge memorialization and holidayization, if we can make up a word, I guess, into something similar.
Everybody else does.
Yeah, into something similar with a national aspect. So it's almost as if governments appropriate social gatherings that cultures develop amongst their communities. Governments oftentimes appropriate these to try to weave loyalty and patriotism into one's daily life, right?
Absolutely, like 100%.
100%.
And they do that not only with they definitely do it with Thanksgiving and Christmas, because that promotes the family. And whether it's culturally or legally by legislation, it's so evident that government apparatuses will promote unity in the family and unity to the nation, which could be a reason as to why you might refer to a certain person as the father, right? You have a micro version of a father in your home, and then you have someone who refers to themselves as the father in Germany, or as the father or the uncle in Vietnam, meaning that they are of blood and guidance, or they are of blood and leadership. And that's why we use those references, I would imagine. Uncle Ho in Vietnam, Adolf as the father. I don't. Do they call Kim Jong Un anything of that nature? Do they refer to him as like a dad-like or father-like person?
I don't know. It's a good question. It's a good question.
The Holy Trinity, the Father.
Yeah, and then you also have some nations refer to the motherland like Russia, or the fatherland like Hitler, which could oftentimes change as well. These are sort of like,
or just motherland in general.
Yeah, I think these are all sort of like subliminal cultural messages that the hegemonic forces of a society perpetuate oftentimes. And I think
because we're trying to give credence and value to those institutions, the government, the nation.
Which is why I feel like my approach about this stuff is kind of like to talk. I usually talk about these holiday things moving up towards them. I think it's a good idea to understand presence in society, positionality, where you're at, and what you spend your time doing and why. So you don't get caught up too much like some people do, where they end up dying of stress trying to get traveling all over. Consumer culture has woven so much into these holidays that some people end up killing. They get trampled on trying to get into the store at midnight, right?
Yeah.
Like, you can't. That's a sign that, man, you're too much invested in these imagined entities that our society kind of develops. And you know, there's always, anytime that there's a potential to maximize or exploit a profit, somebody's going to jump in and try to like magnify it, or take advantage of it. And maybe sort of being aware of how traditions and holidays have transformed over time, what elements kind of stuck together, which ones evolved or got left behind and added on to, can help you understand maybe and see some of the irrational types of developments within your own celebratory traditions at your micro level that may need to be switched up, right? And I think that's one of them. This consumeristic, uh, compulsive drive in these holiday starting points, Black Friday or whatever. They do a lot of harm, I think, to people involved in them. That could be minimized if you're sort of aware of some of these impulses that societies tend to create in an irrational way sometimes. I don't know.
For sure. But I think also, even if you are aware of things, it still may not like drive you in a logical direction. I know a lot of guys that are like, I know this next drink is not logical, but I'm gonna take it anyways. I know that doing or engaging in this relationship is not logical, but I'm gonna do it anyways. And consumerism or consuming in the vein that Americans tend to consume, and I'm one of them because I'm the first. Like, I don't like the holidays, and when I say the holidays, like Christmas usually, because it's a lot of maybe it's the way I framed it. It's always me rushing to get last minute things for people so that they feel okay with how I see them or treat them, even though they know I love them. But for me, it's always a stress,
Right.
and for everybody else, it's like, you know what? So I never really care for it. Now, however, I have been around a person who genuinely loves the holidays for the sake of giving, and like, and this person isn't wealthy. Like this person, they just. There's some people that just love to give,
Yeah, for
even
sure.
when they don't got it. You
Yeah.
know, I was like, she was telling me about, yeah, this year I'm gonna give this for the Toys for Tots. I go, what's Toys for Tots? She goes, well, they're these kids that are underprivileged and underserved, and they have their names on these little bitty things, and they have a list, and you can donate to that list. And I go, for real? She goes, yeah, it's called Toys for Tots. And I was like, well, I got 3 tots. I'm gonna try to put their little mother on. I'm gonna put their names up on that thing. I got 3 tots right now. I'm gonna throw up. Can I put my kids up there? And they're like, shut up, Eric. You can't do that. I got some underprivileged, underserved kids in my house right now. But I was. It kind of took me aback, dude, because this person's really young. They don't make much money,
Yeah.
but she grew up in a house where that was just what they did.
See, that
And
speaks to the
so
layer of meaning behind holidays that is very, very important to pay attention to when we are framing our criticisms and our discussions about these things, right?
for sure. And we just and it shows that the holidays are in essence what you make them.
Right.
They're stressful if you make them stressful, Eric. I should be telling myself this. Or they could be what that young lady made them to be because of how she saw it. And now with that being said, now that I'm having this self-reflective thought process like right now as we're talking, maybe I need to do a better job of like maybe showing my kids something different about the holidays, that it doesn't always have to be like this. Maybe I know they know that it's about caring for family and providing for family. I know they know that, but maybe not as much as I should stress it when I stress these other items.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, that's the beauty of this uh not knowing the topic, just going off the cuff, where you have these good moments where these thoughts come to mind. That's the importance of contemplative thought as well. We don't take enough time in our society to reflect. We're constantly moving forward and trying to produce and consume and develop and uh, level up, that we don't spend enough time contemplating, which can bring creative ways of approaching problems in our life and free us to understanding new ways of being and new ways of approaching particular issues or things in society. One of the things you mentioned that I wanted to expound upon is this idea of awareness, maybe not driving you to a logical conclusion. I think it may be worth noting. First thing that came to my mind is the actual uh, official definition of addiction, according to the most recent diagnostic statistical manual of psychiatry, where they
Which is
say that.
culturally relative, by the way.
Oh, absolutely, 100%. Absolutely, it's a great book by Ethan Waters. Crazy Like Us really shows that, or Richard de Grandprie's book on cult of pharmacology and how we look at drugs. 100%. The mind and the ailments of the mind are part of culture and the reflection of culture, um, which
And
is
time.
yeah, absolutely. And so and actually, I think this definition may actually be correlated correlated to this issue we got in our society of mass stimulation or limbic capitalism. And they say that addiction is the compulsive use or consumption of a substance despite negative consequences in your life.
Oh,
So you
dude, I'm
know
an
it's
addict.
causing a problem. You're aware of the issue, and you can't stop it.
Yeah.
That's the basic definition of addiction in our society, and we don't address how to fix that well enough. What we usually use, which is like the 12-step program, about
Mm-hmm.
5 to 8% of people who ever go through it get better. So
Yeah.
the main thing we use to help cure addiction works on 5 to 8% of the people who go through it, which shows you that it's not working at all. We don't approach it properly. Maybe our approach is designed to keep it that way. And that's what this limbic capitalist philosophy refers to, and the idea of mass consumerism. Sort of once they pinpointed the point of your brain that gets stimulated with uh, aspects of technology that include likes and thumbs up and all these other types of different dings and things that they've been able to manipulate your limbic portion of your brain to intensify uh, compulsive practices to help uh, increase their income. Um, and in order to change this about us, it takes a lot of different ways of thinking. I don't clearly know all the answers yet, but there's a really good book called Change or Die that I like, where this guy talks about how um, the vast majority of people who have a heart attack and they go through a triple bypass surgery at a young age, and then the doctor tells them, "Yo, you're going to die if you don't change your lifestyle. This is like you're lucky to survive here." And for maybe about a couple weeks afterwards, they're all on board. Yeah, I'm going to change my lifestyle. But the vast majority of them end up going back to the exact same routine, because what this guy says in his book is that, there's certain aspects that don't help you change, like fear, facts. Facts don't help people change. You give them the facts about something, uh, that's not going to make them change, because there's other attachments that are making them act the way they are other than facts. In fact, people will just pretend facts don't exist, or they'll create the ones that they want in order to justify what they want to do, right? Fear doesn't work. Um, these types of things, the way we work in our society to attack addiction actually perpetuates it. Um, and so maybe figuring out how to see when these changes spark, or trying to figure out the moments in your life that you can break cycles, is a very difficult thing, but it's worth paying attention to on a different level, I think, than our society has portrayed it.
Yeah. One thing you said, and just to circle back, it almost sounds like you could make the argument that we're addicted to these holidays then, or
Mm.
we're addicted to celebrating these holidays because we are engaging in these actions repetitively, um,
That are causing us problems,
that are causing us problems.
getting us
Or
ran
maybe
over.
we're addicted to American culture because we're addicted to American culture, or we're addicted to fitting in, that we're willing to engage in these repetitive practices that cause us stress, like Thanksgiving. I know for a fact I was stressed preparing for Sunday. And I told my lady, man, I was like, because she was like, Eric, are we going to do this? Eric, we got to make sure we talk to this person. We got to talk to that person. We got to make sure we go and get the turkey 2 days early because we got to brine it for a whole day. Da 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 da. And I'm like, man, all I want to do is grade or be left alone.
See, it's key.
And it was more stress. And then so now that makes me think that maybe our society is addicted to perpetuating these celebrations, uh, even when they're harmful to some of us, not all of us. My kids aren't harmed by it. They're out of sight, out of mind. Not that they're out of sight, out of mind, but they're not blinded, they're shielded
Yeah, they're just
from
going
the
through the
stressors
motions.
of.
They're in the period maybe where, to reference one of our previous episodes, they're in the period in which manufacturing, they're manufacturing consent up in their society. You frame us, you mold us to consent to these behaviors, because if we're stressed and we're running around and doing all these things in the holidays, we're not sitting here writing books, learning about knowledge. I talked to my man Jerome quite a bit about this. He's been uh, getting involved in academics, and it's like a lot of people from his neighborhood are upset. Where you been? Why you ain't hanging out? Why you ain't doing all these things? You could realize that if you want to do something in life, sometimes it's going to require you uh, to really stop investing meaningless time, or just purely communal time, which, although communal time is not meaningless at all, but it can be in these frivolous manners, and dedicate that time to other things. It takes a lot of time and energy to be able to produce knowledge. It doesn't have to be in a book, be in a PowerPoint, be whatever it is that you want to do. But if you're producing knowledge and you're creating knowledge, and you're taking elements of the human experience and you're putting them together to provide a message, this takes a lot of time. It takes quiet space to think, where you can maybe close the door, and turn off uh, dinging things, and focusing more. But again, that limbic capitalist tendency is trying to cloud our ability to do those things, which keeps us participating in these behaviors that cause us problems,
Mm,
right?
yeah, for sure.
So it's hard. I don't know. It's
Man,
weird, man.
watch out,
I
fool. You just diagnosed me as an addict in this past 30 minutes.
Honestly, I think maybe we all probably are on some level in Western society. This,
I can count probably on my hand 5 things right now that I feel like I'm addicted to based on your definition.
everybody. I mean, I mean, and we like to scapegoat drugs, but really, it's any behavior that can bring some sort of uh, comfort or stimulant.
For sure.
Stimulant.
Rela- relationships.
Oh yeah, gambling, sex,
Yeah,
driving, speeds, going fast. I mean, there's so many different things that your lived experience gravitates you towards. And when I say Western, maybe I like to adopt Ethan Waters' is thing where he says weird, which is an acronym for Western educated, industrial, rich democracies. People who live in these modern mass consumer societies that have been around for the past 2 centuries exhibit these types of behaviors that we're describing. Um, and
hmm
maybe that's what addiction is about, right? Uh, this
Extremism.
tool, yeah, capitalism utilized this tendency of these human relationships that developed in the second industrial revolution to perpetuate our behaviors in a way, because they know most of us will just kind of follow the thing, because that your brain is sending signals to kind of make you do these things, and without significant attempts to try to break the cycle, we all tend to rely on our uh, behaviors that without thinking about it, right? And that's why it's so key to think about these things and to kind of like reflect on your actions and the purpose of them, maybe.
That's crazy. I don't know how we turned celebrating Thanksgiving into an addiction, but we
Mm.
did it.
holiday, the
Like it's
holiday
like
addiction.
well,
Man,
eating turkey. You're addicted. You have addictive personality.
sure. Well,
Because I
it's
like
interesting.
stuffing.
Yeah, like sugar. We can even. What about sugar? Is sugar a drug? Are people addicted to sugar? I've done that before. Try to go 7 days without
Every day.
any sugar.
Not
Try,
sugar,
try to go.
caffeine.
Yeah, try to go. You know, especially if you're dependent on caffeine or sugar. I tried to go 7 days. I went six before, and after like day three, I wanted to die. I was so bored out of my mind. I couldn't think. I couldn't do anything. Everything. My mind was just bombarded with, oh, I want this food. I want that. I can't take this. I can't. I couldn't do anything. I couldn't concentrate. And then by like day five, I had more energy. I felt amazing. I remember very vividly riding my bike and usually being winded. And I'm like, man, I could keep going. I'm like going around in loops because I had so much energy after not having any sugar on the fifth or sixth day. And then I broke the fast by eating a donut. And I tell you, I never probably felt worse once I put that donut in my body. It just felt
Hmm.
horrendous again, right there, instantly. And if we talked about sugar the way we talk about crack or heroin, uh, you may see people's reactions a little bit differently. Like the way we talk about these things in our cultures goes back to this culture, right? The way we talk about our participation and consumption of the things in our society have an influence on them.
And really, it sounds a lot like whatever you're conditioning yourself or your community to, the moment that it's removed after being conditioned, it seems odd or problematic or you seem weird, but it sounds to me like you can get over a hump. So if we're conditioned to drinking caffeine every morning, you get rid of it and you're like, what this is I don't like this, but you do see there is a hump you get over and you realize, oh
Yeah.
wait a minute, I can't survive that. So maybe, we've been conditioned to celebrate these holidays. Uh but then maybe after not celebrating after a couple years, 3 years, 4 years, 5 years, and then it becomes null and void or irrelevant or
Absolutely, absolutely. I mean, people who've went through significant transformations in their life where they've done that would attest to that. Where I'm locking myself in a room and I got time to study. When I was traveling all over the world, all over the place, just to talk to people for 15, 20 minutes each before moving to the next one in a span of 10 days, and I had to like ignore a lot of people to get there, and it sucks, but I need the time to focus here instead of messing around. And you see the results, like, and then you become kind of you get liberated a little bit each time that you do these things. And so it's always good to break out of your cycles. I think. I mean, we call it conditioned dependence is the same, very similar, right? Addiction. We have a tendency to think of them as similar, but addiction and dependence are not the same thing, right? You could have an individual who had his leg chopped off in a car accident and has been in the hospital for 7 weeks on morphine. When they get out, they're dependent on morphine, and they may have some headaches and they may feel bad, but they didn't consider themselves an addict. They didn't realize that they were a drug addict, so they can handle the withdrawal much easier than someone who has a psychological aspect to the dependence as well, which is where addiction gets in. If you're on the street and you're smoking crack every day, and your life is full of trauma and pain, and this is the only thing that helps you kind of like think for a minute, you're going to be dependent on it as well. But once you try to wean yourself off of it, all those psychological attachments that you've been burying with your consumption uh, make it a lot more difficult. Biologically, it's the same thing. Heroin withdrawal is like having the flu, right? Uh, but why you're withdrawing is going to make that experience psychologically what it is, and that's where addiction comes in. And I think you can apply that maybe to what we're talking about here with these holidays and our addiction, our compulsive attempt to consume in the holiday traditions so much, and our need and our maybe feeling guilty about not doing it, or stressing ourselves out to try to get it all done in the last minute while we're doing all these other things. Um, it's interesting how they can kind of be correlated.
I don't know. Somehow we figured it out.
Yeah, it's interesting.
I never in my world would I've ever thought that we could start a conversation about
Thanksgiving and end up on
about Thanksgiving and then end up talking about how I'm
heroin.
addicted. I'm
Heroin
addicted.
withdrawal.
I have addictive personality.
Mm.
But now it makes sense, man. It makes sense. But which
Yeah,
is
man,
good.
culture. That's why I
I
always
think
like.
like and you know you make a good point. Like you can be addicted to a lot of things other than just drugs. There's a tendency to think about just drugs alone, but like maybe I'm addicted to, you know, people pleasing.
Sure, 100%.
Some cats are addicted to not saying no.
Absolutely.
Addicted to work. For work is for real. I've seen cats where like you're it's
Yeah, we don't
harming.
like to frame it this way. It's a lot easier to just chalk them up as to brutal monsters, but rape perpetrators are addicted to uh, a form of power and sexual deviance that is connected to it. They're addicted to that. They oftentimes feel like they can't
Addicted to the
stop.
sexual power.
Certainly, I mean
Would we
there are
say like
different.
they're addicted to sexual power?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's a lot of people who argue. You see someone who has this kind of proclivity to want to participate in rape, and they try to stop themselves. Oh, I don't want to do this right now. I can't do this. I'm gonna get in trouble. And then something just sort of overcomes them. What do you think that is? That's that addictive stimulation of something that maybe occurred in this
Right.
person's life over time that made
Mhm.
them draw these connections and networks with these stimulating aspects of the body, without being able to break that cycle. Like the book Change or Die tries to tell us to break these cycles.
It just
Um,
seems like the we obviously don't have a clear cut way to break these cycles, which is why we have, and not to say that we have these repeat offenders, but the recidivism rate of certain activities is fairly high. So you know, if you're conditioned to drink every day, then you'll you know you're and even if you do stop, there's a very strong urge and pulse to drink again.
sure.
Um, you know, I saw this documentary on a community of incarcerated, convicted pedophiles who were given like a community to live in not Fort Worth, Florida. In Florida, there was this community, and it was made up of all registered sex offenders. They could all live here without condemnation and you know things of that nature. And one of the guys living in is like, man, I have these thoughts all day. But I have to tell myself to repress them because I know that they are wrong in this society.
Yeah.
Um, and he says, but many of us just can't help ourselves. Many of them,
Yeah.
we don't have a clear way to handle, I guess,
Well,
those
and our
addictions.
society doesn't help that, right? So, to bring it back to the drug, if you throw somebody in jail because they're addicted to something, well, jail is a negative consequence. So, if addiction is the compulsive participation in something despite negative consequences, and you throw something and you give somebody negative consequences by throwing them in jail, you're not healing their addiction. You're masking it.
Right.
You're putting them in a different environment, which they oftentimes can do. This reminds me of my man, Abdul, who in prison he can't consume his drug, but when he gets out on parole, can he stop? No. and then they get them back in. They do that on purpose to you. You see, when you're around the substance, you can get out of this system. Somebody can put you in a cage or take you in a war zone or put you in somewhere, and your body's gonna flip the script. You're gonna be out of your comfort zone, and you can go long times without things. But then once you get back into the environment in which you developed an attachment to this behavior, it's far more difficult to resist that compulsive drive, right? It's one of the reasons why a lot of people argue, like, if you want to try to quit smoking, start by smoking with the opposite hand that you're accustomed to, because it'll begin to like trigger your brain to be all off wired. And once your brain is off wired, because it's so wired and habitually with this way, once you flip the script on it, it opens up these windows and doors for you to try to take an opportunity to change, which then you can hopefully find community to reinforce your project of trying to stop, and repeat it in different ways, right? And so, you could actually be an alcoholic,
or you just become a switch hitter and you're token with two hands,
Yeah, right. Because the switch ain't gonna end it, but it'll open up the opportunity for you to then look for something to gravitate to that could help you change. You may not. You may go back. Right. There's all these different things that'll happen, but what we know is that the perpetual habitual aspect of it certainly perpetuates it. Right. And so there are these ways in which people can kind of like stimulate parts of their body and mind to help protect them from participating in behaviors that they feel maybe are causing them harm. It's interesting.
Well, I need to get a left-hand version of my addictions then.
Don't we all?
But and hey, we're at that time. We're about 5 minutes from the end.
Man, I ain't even got to think of any quotes yet. It's hard to go ahead.
Considering everything we said, man, I wouldn't even know either. Because we covered a lot.
Did I do have a few interesting ones somewhere, but my usually I'm already looking at it by this time. So I haven't really had much in my mind, but I don't know if I used tell me if I have, because I feel like I used Clifford Geertz before, but I don't know if it was this quote where he says, "What man is may be so entangled with where he is, who he is, and what he believes that it is inseparable from them."
You haven't used that one.
That reminds me a lot of what we've been talking about, because we one of the key threads that binds everything together in our discussion here has been behaviors and how we develop them and how we participate in these traditions, and all of the answers to those questions may be so entangled with where we grow up, who we are with the experiences that we've accumulated over the course of our lives, and how they have helped us understand the world and make sense of the world around us to give us these comforts which perpetuate our behavior. I don't know. What do you think?
Makes sense to me. I mean, I think that's a perfect quote then, if that's the case, for sure.
Right on, man. All right. Well, another episode down.
We got it.
We're off
all right, man.
Y'all enjoy.
Yeah, I know, right? You too. I mean, I got a lot of grading to do, so we'll see what's up.
Yeah, that's what I'll be doing too. All right, man. You have a good one. I'll see you next week.
All right, man. All right, take it easy.